Hey guys, Milan here with Women at the Ready. So today I'm going to show you something, and I'm going to use this blue gun. It's actually a plastic gun. We use it for training, so it's not real. But a common issue with right-handed shooters is that they end up shooting low and to the left, low and to the left, low and to the left. How many times have you heard that? So I do get messages, and it is also something I've had to deal with a lot with new students, not everyone, but it is a very common issue with right-handed shooters. If you're left-handed and you're shooting low and to the right, it's the same thing. So it's usually one of two things. I usually have to either fix the trigger finger pressure, or I have to fix the grip. So let's talk about the grip. So if you're new to this, or if you maybe not necessarily brand new but kind of new, I'm going to show you how to properly grip the gun. Now, a lot of times when I go to the range, I see some crazy stuff, and it boggles my mind. But in any case, so shooting hand. You take your shooting hand first, you look at the web of your hand, you place it all the way up, just flank it all the way up to the beaver tail, okay, to the root of the gun, all the way up. There shouldn't be any space between your hand and the gun. Now, you want to make sure that you don't go over, because remember, this is the action, and the slide is going to rack back every time you pull that trigger. So make sure you don't have anything blocking the slide. So that being said, you're here, fingers off the trigger, and you want to make sure that your three fingers are up high, up against the trigger guard. So not down here. You want to make sure you're all the way up here. All right, so this is your shooting hand. So now, a way to look at this is the gun is actually an extension of your arm. So when you punch out, the gun, the slide, basically should follow the bone in your arm. So it's basically an extension of your arm. So when that's done and you got a good grip, you want to take your support hand. Now think support. So support, you're going to go thumb underneath. So thumb on top of thumb, parallel, no spaces. So take a look real close, no spaces, nice and tight. All right, a lot of times I see this, so there's gaps, or I see this, or I see this. I've even seen this, which is super dangerous, because if you do that, you're going to slice your finger, and you're going to cause a malfunction in your gun, because the slide is not going to cycle. So again, you want to make sure that there's no space up here. You want to make sure that there's no space over here. Thumb on top of thumb, parallel to each other against the frame. Try and stay away from the slide. Keep it up against the frame. Another good way to tell is when you're looking at the top, your thumb and your index are in line. So that's one view for you. Let me show you this way. My thumb and my thumb of my support hand and my index finger, basically my trigger finger, are in line. Okay? If your wrist if you have a break in your wrist, and I'm going to cover that in a second, and your thumb is kind of like back here, you're going to see that they're not in line. So then you have to roll your wrist. Sometimes if you're shooting high, what happens is you actually have a break in your wrist. You're breaking your wrist. So think of it this way. Just roll your wrist out so that it's completely straight. So if I were to put a piece of paper here, it would be completely flat. There wouldn't be any space between the paper and my wrist. So that's another good thing to practice while you're at home, is locking your wrist out and working on your grip. So again, I'm locked out. My support hand thumb and my my trigger finger are in line. Now, trigger finger, another big issue. It's the pad of the finger, guys. It's the pad of the finger. So you're using not the tip, not the joint. You're using the pad of the finger, placing it on the face of the trigger. When you press the trigger, you're not squeezing it. So don't squeeze the gun. Don't jerk the trigger, because your shots will end up going all over the place. Basically, they're going to go low and to the left. So when you squeeze, you tend to do this, and that's why the shots go low to the left. So it's a gentle press, smooth and gentle press to the back, and the break should surprise you. So if your shots are not going to the left, but they're dropping, you're most probably just dipping the gun. So what's happening is you're anticipating the recoil and you're trying to counteract that recoil psychologically. So what you're doing is this. So you may not jerk the trigger and make it go to the left, but you're just doing this motion. So practice makes perfect. The more you practice, the more all that will go away, but the grip is huge. The grip is huge. Now, one thing that I wanted to mention is your support hand. I talked about thumb on top of thumb, but then when you're here, these 4 fingers wrap the grip and try to not have any space either over here. I like to keep everything nice and tight, and usually it's always best if you can have all your fingers on the grip and not like hanging over down here. I also do not like the teacup. That's a pet peeve of mine. So just make sure that your fingers are on top of your other fingers right here and nice and tight. So I hope that helps. Next time you get to the range, think about these things and see if that helps your shots.